Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone has had a wonderful time. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. We are back. We're officially back and at it tonight, starting tonight. So what we are doing right now, obviously, so as you can tell, we've had a bit of a break. It's been actually over a month at this point. And the reason we decided to do this break is because we have been doing this for, well, really since the war began. Most of our staff team actually worked prior to starting this project with another YouTuber, and we were researching for him pretty much as the war started. And then we went and started this project because we didn't exactly align morally anymore, which is, I think, probably the best way to put it. And so at that point, it's been well over a year, and we've been doing this. At one point, we were doing it every single night. Then we tried to do it every other night. So, but we had to take for our own mental health at this point, pretty much some time for ourselves. And we tried to bring some more people onto the staff team and try and alleviate some of that pressure. We've reorganized. We will be streaming once a week now. We will be doing that every Sunday at roughly 7 p.m. Eastern time for every single person out there. We'll be covering everything back throughout the past week, essentially, which is exactly what we're doing tonight. We're covering everything that's happened, or pretty much all the big points that have happened over the last week, and we are going to be back onto a regular schedule. So I hope everyone new joining us, that you enjoy the program. I hope everyone returning, thank you for coming back. It's always happy to have you guys here. If you guys are new here, if you are interested, of course, the point of this project is to try and raise as much money and to help as many people as possible that are directly affected by the news stories we're talking about. That means that we are going through here, and if you check out the video description, there are a ton of different organizations down there. All of them, 70% or more of the donations that they receive go directly to their programs, and that's something that we have vetted for by going through a lot of their prior tax records and stuff and the likes. All of them are doing pretty amazing work and have been active. And then, of course, we also have our own initiative, which we started right before we ended up going on break, which I'm happy to say has already had some really good results. For those that don't know, Operational Guardian Support did actually end up pushing out a bunch of funds over to the 54th Mechanized Brigade over there in Ukraine, and it actually went towards covering about a fifth of their repair costs for one of their vehicles, which was damaged. We did get those confirmation photos, so we'll actually be posting them, or have already posted them onto our Discord for you guys. And then I can actually pull that up if you give me a second. There we go. So as we pull this over here, so there you go. That is the fixed vehicle. So we will be able to be posting that onto our website here very shortly, as really the first major success as an initiative. And we'll be continuing to do that. Thank you everyone for the support. So regardless of whether you're supporting the other organizations, which cover a wide variety of things, whether that's in Ukraine, in Europe, in Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, or in North America, doesn't matter. They're all wonderful organizations, and we really appreciate the support. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. One of the biggest things you can do is help us try and grow this channel, grow this project. The more people that come here, obviously, the more people there are to donate, but also the more awareness comes to these issues and these topics, which are very pressing matters in our world. So please, if you can, give us that like and subscribe. It always does help the channel and spread awareness on the communities you may be a part of. So, moving on from that, as we get ready to roll into the news here, if you happen to have any questions regarding the news topics, please feel free to ask them. We can't be experts on everything, but we do have some experience here inside of our little community here. And I'll be more than happy to try and answer those questions live here on stream for you guys. So maybe to give you a little bit of a background on myself, I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I served as an O-352 anti-tank missileman with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, and I was a corporal. I did 2 tours in the Middle East. My first tour between October of 2017 through March of 2018. I spent roughly 4.5 months in the country of Syria as part of Operation Inherent Resolve, and I was attached to Special Operations operations forces there, funding the Islamic State and doing stabilization efforts in the northeastern part of the country. I also spent about a month and a half in transit in Kuwait. My second deployment, I went back where I oversaw where I was attached to the crisis response company in Kuwait, where I spent the majority of my time. This is between October of 2018 through October of 2019 through March of 2020. New Year's of 2020, I was one of the 100 Marines that went and responded to the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, being overrun with protesters and a breach in security there. We went there, resecured the embassy, and I oversaw all anti-armor operations within the Baghdad Embassy complex and Union 3 compounds. From there, I went to Saudi Arabia, trained Saudi Arabian Marines preparing to deploy to Yemen before rotating home and getting out. And now I am a logistical coordinator for a motor vehicle transportation company. So I am a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine. I'm also a fully cross-trained rifleman, a fully cross-trained machine gunner, a partially cross-trained radio operator, and a CLS, or Combat Lifesaver Certified Marine, meaning I've received additional medical training, and I also do have real-world experience providing aid to actual casualties, specifically trauma victims. And, of course, I do a lot of other things. I enjoy a lot of other things out there. A lot of other topics interest me, including human geography, geopolitics, and the like. So, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, but I always implore that you as a viewer, please be doing your own research because there is no other substitute. And so with that, we now can move actually into the news, and we're trying to get more into the journalistic side of things. So there are going to be more points that are actually condensed into one point now, as opposed to what we were doing before, which was this city got shelled, this city got shelled, this city got shelled. It will all be more or less into one point, and trying to take a more journalistic approach. So that's kind of one of the shifts that you may see in going forward as we're covering much broader topics and looking at these things in a little bit more of a broader scale going forward. But with that, we start off here, of course, in Kiev. As we can see here, the Ukraine has been the focus. It's been the focus since we really started the channel, and we continue to see that we'll see that through until the war is ended. Right now, we're on day 459, so we're covering 451 through 458, and unfortunately, we do have the solemn duty, as per usual, of covering war crimes and civilian casualty updates, specifically the child casualty update. Quote, Russian war crime statistics for the past week. This is from May the 19th through the 26th, 2023. 1,611 new crimes were registered, and at least 483 children were killed, 984 injured, and the data is without full consideration of places of active hostilities. That's coming from the General Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine. They furthered that up with another update over the last 24 to 48 hours, saying, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 483 Ukrainian children have been killed, and 984 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region. Moreover, 395 Ukrainian children were reported missing, and 19,486 were deported. At the same time, 12,830 Ukrainian children were found, and 369 were returned home. Once again, coming from the General Prosecutor's Office. Now, the forced deportation of children actually violates international humanitarian law in a lot of ways, but more specifically, it's actually a crime against humanity and a crime of genocide. According to the 1949 Geneva Conventions, the 1993 Rome Statute, which establishes the International Criminal Court, deportation of children the forceful deportation of children is actually a crime of genocide under those articles. And so this is why it's such a hard reasoning why we're reporting on this so heavily. Not only is it a tactic of pulling the heartstrings, when you pull children into something, you're talking about children, it really gets people more involved, but also because it's a huge crime. It's a crime of genocide. There is no worse crime than genocide when it comes to international law, and so it's definitely something to take note when you're talking about tens of thousands of children being forcibly deported. And with Russian law, there is no kind of way to adopt children outside of Russia. And we can see this is kind of General Prosecutor's Office from their official Twitter. We can see 89,563 crimes of aggression and war crimes thus far, 17,236 crimes against national security, and of course those statistics we saw earlier, 483 Ukrainian children thus far killed, with 984 having been injured. And we can see a map of where the vast majority of these crimes are taking place. UN Human Rights, the United Nations also has been following up. While their numbers will trail behind, this is what the United Nations is confirming. So they are seeing a lot of increase here, and we can also see that some of their numbers actually are ahead of what are being said here. So far, 8,000, according to the United Nations, 8,895 people have been killed, including 523 Ukrainian children. In addition, 15,117 people have been injured, including 1,035 children. Those numbers are especially going to be seeing, or those will be climbing as this war continues, and as we're seeing an immense amount of basically scorched earth tactics. There's really no better way of putting it. Have you ever seen videos and photos of the city of Mariupol? There's the city of Marinka. There's really nothing left. Same thing with Mariupol. I'd say Marinka is actually even worse than Mariupol was, which is almost unfathomable when you see and you follow how bad that battle goes and just how destructive that battle is. The constant shelling of civilian populations, civilian centers, such as the city of Marinka, is also considered a war crime under several different articles, and this includes Additional Protocol 1 of the 1949 Geneva Conventions, the 1949 Geneva Conventions themselves, and several other conventions as well. When it comes to some of the weaponry that they're using, the usage of the 9S-22M incendiary grad rocket is one of the most horrendous things you can do under the types of weaponry which are banned. We continue on here, and we actually go over here into cut across and into Russia with this, and that's because there was an incursion into Russia. As many of you may already know that have been following the war, there was an incursion into Russia earlier. This would have happened, I believe, in March, and we saw an incursion then by the Free Russian Legion. We're seeing elements of the Free Russian region and associated groups once again pressing into now Belgorod Oblast, and this situation definitely put a lot of panic in there, and it has caused a lot of havoc for the Russians, especially in this border region. Despite previous statements by the Ukrainian government that they were not associated with the Free Russian Legion, the fact is that they were using recently transferred Humvees and MRAPs, including the Navistar Max Pro, which was provided to the Ukrainian Armed Forces in Lend-Lease. However, it was very effective, once again sowing panic in the ranks of the Russian command, as well as the population, causing many in the region to actually flee, including the region's governor, who had a photo taken of them at the airport leaving the region. It appears that after several hours of fighting, the Free Russian forces did retreat back within Ukrainian borders, but we also saw photos of things like the Free Russian flag are actually being flown by balloons in downtown Moscow. So it had a very large impact to people who are against the Putin regime inside of Russia as well. It was a very blatant statement of support in some cases. It may not have been major in many places due to suppression or repression, but we're seeing some here. Once again, another video. Take a look.
Друзья, русский добровольческий корпус снова совершил невозможное. Мы снова на родине. Доказательства прямо за моей спиной. В который раз мы заходим на территорию России с боями или тихо, это уже не важно. Пламя борьбы разгорается по всей стране. Ждите нас и в вашем населенном пункте. Слава РДК! Ну что ж.
We can see here, this is over Belgorod Oblast.
Ебать, что-то страшное творится. Что-то, да. Что это? Я не знаю.
And those are evacuations of those border regions inside of Russia. Coming down to Kramatorsk, we have the latest daily Donetsk update coming from Pavel Krolenko, the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. He said, quote, on May 27th, the number of victims of Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 1 killed, 3 injured. And we can see this coming from his official Twitter post, which came out this morning, and this covers the last 24 hours of military casualties, or of civilian casualties. I apologize. Koshtenivka ended up having 1 individual killed. Kharkov had 2, with Chervone having 1 killed, or 1 injured. So far, civilian casualties within areas that are currently under Ukrainian control include 1,534 civilians having been killed, as well as 3,599 being injured. Keep in mind, this does not include areas currently under Russian occupation. So places such as Volnovakha, Mariupol, the city of Donetsk itself, all of those cannot be included because they cannot be confirmed as to the casualty numbers. And in Mariupol alone, we know tens of thousands of Ukrainian civilians were killed, and mass grave sites are all over the area in that southern region there. But now we get into the fighting in the east. It's been very brutal fighting over the last month while we've been on our break, but the lines on the map really haven't changed drastically. And that's something to kind of note. Ukrainian forces were able to successfully halt Russian troops inside of the city of Bakhmut. However, the fierce fighting does continue in all of these regions, the same ones we've been talking about for months on end. Keep in mind, the battle for Bakhmut properly began last June. We're coming up very quickly onto a year of fighting here in Bakhmut, and we're not seeing any give or take from either side at this point. And so heavy fighting has continued all along this front. Fierce fighting in Marinka, of course, Bakhmut and Volodar do continue, and Ukrainian forces have launched small counteroffensives around Bakhmut, which have successfully stalled Russian forces in that area, and even in some cases have pushed them back from where they were within the city. Ukrainian forces also have launched several series of strikes against the city of Mariupol and down in the Donetsk region, as well as Berdyansk, which has really kind of sowed some concern amongst the Russian command, as well as their logistical lines. It's caused a lot of issues. One of the biggest things Ukraine is focused on throughout the entirety of the war that the Russians simply are unable to is they've used, even though they are lacking a number, they're using their range and intelligence advantage on a lot of their systems, whether that be the HIMARS, the Mars 2 systems, or what have you, the 155s even, with their artillery being about a 5-kilometer difference without rocket-assisted munitions in consideration. They outgun them in range, and so they're using that standoff and they're using those precision weapons really to strike at high-value targets, Russian command posts, Russian communication centers, Russian logistical hubs, whether those be vehicle depot, motor pools, vehicle depots, whether that be ammunition storage, fuel storage, what have you. Now, we're seeing a lot of effect. In fact, there was a point in time where we saw a reduction in Russian artillery capability on the front line and activity by upwards of over 50%. And this is down from firing well over 10,000 shells a day. And that was confirmed with the firm's fire map as well. We could see a drawdown on that shelling earlier in the past year. And we continue to see that. That's just because they're cutting logistical lines. They're hitting the depots closer to the front to make those lines of logistics elongated and making them weaker. The longer that logistical line is between each individual hub in that line, the more difficult it is to get supplies to the front line and do it quickly, really degrading operational capability there. Non-governmental agencies and nonprofits have all been operating within these areas too, and it's very important to note that that many people within these regions continue to suffer from an incapability of having basic necessities: shelter, food, clean drinking water, electricity, heating or cooling as we roll in here into the summer. A lot of very difficult times have been lasted. However, they have successfully lasted through the very harsh Eastern European winters. So that hurdle has been overcome, but it is also important to keep in mind that that will be coming up quicker than many people expect here, and as we get back into the later part of the year. The Rasputitsa, for the most part, is over, as springtime is now coming to an end and we are moving into summer. So we'll be able to see large-scale offensives once again, and we are going to see a lot of large-scale movements. The long-anticipated counteroffensive by the Ukrainians has not yet taken place as far as we can tell, and so we are waiting to see what happens there. But basic necessities by these NGOs and these nonprofits are being rushed to the front lines, and we continue to see a lot of good efforts there in Kiev and Donetsk, parts of Luhansk that are under Ukrainian control right now, and in some of the more riverine areas which are still trying to recover from the devastation that was incurred during Russian offensives and occupations earlier in the year. Take a look.
Мультик, що скажеш після Бахмуту? Нічого, що ми отримали піздою і з'їбалися нахуй. Тільки відступили в сторону. Ну його маху. Вернемося. Це хуйово. Будемо забирати скоро. Вже ще скажу. Ну його нахуй. Чи сюди не повертався. Руський мір нахуй прийшов на землю. Пізда.
Що ти спіздив підарів БК, да? Йоп твою мать, нормально. РПГшечку забрали, може вони поки загоряють, блядь. Після наряду стомлені, блядь. Віддихають, а ми в них тихенько, блядь, після БК з тачкою зразу, нахуй, я хуєю.
Ну уходь, 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 уходь. Ну уходь, ебаный в рот.
Блядь, да заебал телефон, ты мать.
Все, все, хороший, блин.
Развалишь нашу колобу, блядь.
I see here that's a strike in the Luhansk Oblast of a Russian ammunition depot. Those blow up exceptionally well. You can see the rounds starting to cook off there. International Committee of the Red Cross. And this is in Turkiyye.
В місті немає електрики, немає води. На даний момент в місті залишилось близько 1000 осіб. Орієнтовно по відсотках це десь 80-85% це люди пенсійного віку.
We're now in the Donetsk region to deliver items like water tanks, generators, chlorine, water taps, stands and jerrycans to the people of Chasivyar. It's only 3 kilometers from the front line. There are heavy fights in this area, and the people in Chasivyar have a very hard situation when it comes to shelter and water. And the main water supply in Chasivyar is no longer working. So it's a very hard situation for the people in Chasivyar to receive help due to this ongoing international armed conflict, and the needs are huge. These people need help every day, and we will continue to help people in need like them.
We can see the ICRC also bringing in lumber and materials in order to begin rebuilding in a lot of these areas. especially in the rear lines. Coming over into the city of Dnipro, a Russian drone strike ended up hitting a hospital as well as several other locations. A Russian drone strike ended up killing at least one person and injuring 23 more, including 2 children. Russian forces continue to target very critical civilian infrastructure and destroy targets clearly covered under the 1949 Geneva Conventions, such as hospitals and medical personnel. Coming from Amin Dezepper, who is the first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs to Ukraine.
Витягнули людину. Повний треш. Тільки що ракета пролетіла, витягуємо людей. Це пиздець. Уроди, це лікарня.
You can see a series of photos here from the, it took a direct hit. United Nations. We have just heard about another attack hitting a health facility in Ukraine, this time in Dnipro shortly ago. Civilians, including children, were killed or injured while trying to get health services. This is outrageous. Hospitals have special protection under international humanitarian law. They must never be a target. Coming from Denise Brown, humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine for the OCHA. International Committee of the Red Cross, with that photo of the facility, said international humanitarian law prohibits targeted attacks on medical facilities, health personnel, medical transport, anywhere, everywhere, and they must be protected. The Red Cross also stated that they did have emergency response teams at the facility to assist with casualties and rescue efforts. You can see once again, long shot of that. That clinic, once again, taking an immediate hit, or immediate direct hit. And so that is the situation there inside of the country of Ukraine. Quite a lot of developments, but also nothing that has changed or shifted the wars. Other news includes possibility of different types of equipment going to Ukraine as a result of Ramstein, which we will be getting to probably later next week as we start to see some of that actually put into action as opposed to the promises that have been made. We want to see what is actually happening. With that, we move on into the points in our international news segment. And there are several of them. We jump down here right onto the border of Afghanistan and Iran, where fighting has broken out between the two countries. Fighting between the Iranians and the Taliban along the Afghan-Iranian border. Some reports indicate that the Taliban having captured at least one Iranian border checkpoint, and the Taliban government having moved troops and equipment into the region. This includes armor and even towed artillery pieces. This comes after the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that they do not recognize Taliban control of the country of Afghanistan. You can see videos of Taliban forces there operating out the back of a Humvee.
हाँ यक लगे था कब्रिस्तान है तीरंदाजी का
We can take a look here. A couple of photos. Toad artillery coming in. And actually, what you're seeing in that last video, while it just looks like a couple of vehicles, what you don't know is that unit that they are bringing in, supposedly that is the Taliban's most elite guard, essentially, is what they equivalent to. That is the Taliban's forces that they have undergone. They have been equipped with whatever the best equipment they have is in their stockpiles that they ended up taking over. And those are the ones that they have been training pretty much since they took over Afghanistan. Those are the ones that have been training with their equipment, that have been indoctrinating Western military tactics into some of their doctrine and how they're fighting a war. However, it remains to be seen how much further this will actually escalate, if it does escalate into a full-on war instead of just some border skirmishes. We have not quite seen anything quite like this coming out of Afghanistan yet thus far. Aside from a couple of cross-border skirmishes, there really hasn't been any large-scale engagements or major movement of troops outside of fighting rebels in certain areas, especially just north of Kabul. Coming down here and into Somalia as we move down into Africa, Al-Shabaab ended up attacking Ugandan forces there in the country of Somalia. Uganda is one of several coalition countries there in Africa, which have been assisting Somalia in stabilization efforts and reestablishing it as a country, essentially. Uganda military forces did come under fire and under attack by Al-Qaeda-linked group Al-Shabaab. And the militants were very successful in overrunning the Uganda military positions. They destroyed or captured several heavy weapons, tanks, vehicles, and killed or captured actually a number of personnel as well. No casualty figures from either side have been released, outside of just noting that the attack did in fact happen. We can see a number of photos here, that is, of the captured and destroyed tanks and armored vehicles of captured Ugandan military troops. So, quite once again, the issue with Africa and militant groups in Africa is that, unlike places in the Middle East, you look at Iraq or you look at Afghanistan or you look at whether successful or not, the amount of investment that has gone into counterterrorism operations by so many countries into the Middle East is insane. It's hard to fathom, quite frankly, just how much money and how much equipment has been sent to the Middle East to fight counterinsurgencies against extremist ideologies, such as Al-Qaeda, such as the Islamic State. How many major military operations and campaigns have taken place to fight counterinsurgency and to fight terrorist organizations in that region. Africa now, as according to the Morocco summit that happened last year, is the front line. That is the most important area now for fighting extremist organizations, because organizations like Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, the Islamic State have taken over large swaths of these countries. Somalia, basically the entire area, southern Somalia, parts of northern Somalia as well, under Al-Shabaab control, truthfully. Mozambique, horrendous issues with the Islamic State there. Nigeria, Benin, Burkina Faso, and Mali all having problems with the Islamic State. The Sahel region is a hotbed for terrorism. There's a lot of fighting happening, and a lot of different groups all fighting within this region. And of course, you have political instability, similar to what we have seen in Sudan, similar to what we have seen elsewhere. Mali, once again, as a good example. But the investment that has been made into the Middle East over the last 20 years has not been made into African countries and African militaries. And as a result, even though there are some efforts, and I'm not saying there aren't any efforts, UNESCO has been doing a lot of work towards that. The French have really put a lot of work and energy and time into that, specifically in Mali, until they withdrew not very long ago at the request of the junta. A lot of work has been done, but there's a lot less than what we saw earlier over the last 20 years in other locations. And so places like in Africa, they're basically equipped exactly the same. Both the terrorists and the military are fighting with exactly the same equipment, same tactics, same level of expertise. And so you're seeing a lot of wins from really the militant side that would otherwise in other countries just be... it would just seem insane if they had won, they came out on top on them. So we'll likely see that for a long time into the future, but unfortunately that is the situation with Africa. Costa Rica. Beautiful, beautiful Costa Rica. I have not actually been myself. I've heard it's a very beautiful country. I knew a lot of people who have gone. And unfortunately, beautiful Costa Rica did have a very large volcanic eruption. Luckily, it's more in a relatively remote area, and so thus far, according to local sources and officials, there has been no major destruction of critical infrastructure of any kind, or really any infrastructure damage, and there are so far no casualties which have been reported, luckily. You see a video here of that eruption. Hello. My co-host decided that they wanted to make an appearance. For those that don't know, this is my co-host Gabby. Please don't lick me. Thank you. An adorable miniature dachshund.
Mar, hay que ir jalando.
And so that is the eruption. Okay, are you ready to sit down? Are you ready to go down? Okay, let's put you down. No, do not jump. There we go. An adorable little dog, I'll tell you what. And coming up here into our final point of the night, we come up to Mexico, where there was an explosion at a Mexican oil and gas company, Pemex Oil and Gas in Mexico, had an explosion which reached over 20 meters in height, rocked their core facility in the country. A total of 7 people were injured as a result of the blast, with many more being evacuated from nearby damaged homes. Firefighter and company specialists actually came on scene to quell the blaze and also begin an investigation as to what exactly happened to cause the explosion. And as you can see, quite a large explosion indeed. But that is actually everything we have in the news. That's all the news points that we have for tonight anyway. Once again, we're getting back into the groove, or we're getting back into the kind of the groove of things, and we're trying, and we have kind of had a lot of meetings or we've had some meetings and discussions in regards to kind of how we want to do this going forward. So the format is for the most part the same, with a few differences here, and we'll be trying to get a little bit more content into there for you guys. And we're happy to be back. It's happy to have everyone back. Happy to see people in the chat. Tim Epps, Riley, it's always happy to see you. Fair, of course, Small Nerd as well. And we're hoping to have some pretty amazing things going forward. I apologize for the very long break, but it was overdue and much needed for many of the staff. So I appreciate your support throughout. In the meantime, I hope that you guys remain safe, that your family and your friends remain safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. We'll be back live next Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central, for another 7 days of news and review. In the meantime, I hope to see you guys all on the Discord and hanging around in the community. Don't forget to be sure to check out the video description and the wonderful organizations down there. And I hope, once again, that you guys remain safe and have a fantastic week. And if you happen to live in the United States, have a very happy Memorial Day, everybody, for those that can't have one. So with that, I hope that you guys do well, and I will see you next Sunday. Be safe, and bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шверхуємо. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки не почем. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your double and shove it up your wrinkled bum. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Going home, Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Ідіть нахуй.